Hi, and welcome back to The Secret Life of Parkinson's. I'm Jessica Krauser, and I'm with Brian Baker.
Hi, Jess. How are you?
Brian, how are you?
I am fantastic.
We have Jim Allen here with us. Jim, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited for this topic. Brian, do you know why I'm excited for this topic?
No.
Okay, so for those of you who've been watching us for a while, you both know that Brian and I have young-onset Parkinson's, and there are a lot of other people like that in our shoes that are still working. And Jim has reached out to me. He's one of our viewers. And Jim is 65 years old. He was diagnosed in 2021 with Parkinson's. He's actually an ambassador for the Davis Finney Foundation, which is amazing. But his career was in employment law attorney. So he reached out to say, hey, your listeners might want to learn more about what they, what our options are, I guess, from having Parkinson's and being in the workplace. So that's what our topic is going to be today.
Very important.
It is. So just to jump right in, Jim, I'd love to have you just kind of give us a background of what you do and how you can help us and what we should be thinking about.
Okay. Well, what I do now is I don't do any of this anymore. I gave my legal practice last year. Employment law is a big deal. I started doing employment law in 1988, so I am predating the Americans with Disabilities Act. The firm I worked for in Atlanta, a large employment law firm, assigned me to learn the ADA. So I've been studying and learning the Americans with Disabilities Act since before it was effectively law.
Wow.
So
Nice.
I go back to the original regulations. I've done class actions of the ADA. I've done employer cases. I've done employee cases. And for 5 years, I worked for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission as a trial attorney in their Savannah, Georgia office. So I've handled disability cases on behalf of the government, on behalf of workers, and on behalf of employers. So I've done everything in employment law.
So what was it like then when you were diagnosed? Did it open up a whole new world for you in terms of your career, like in terms of how you thought of things?
For me, I actually had told my employer, and my employer had told me about problems with my work before I had ever been diagnosed. So I received my diagnosis on a Friday, and on Monday morning, I sat down with my boss and we went through the whole thing. And I made the decision that I needed to leave. I was at that point working as a prosecutor. It was a very simple legal job.
Mm-hmm.
But the stress of handling hundreds of cases at a time was simply too much. And trials are all-day affairs, and that was just not something I was going to do. And I'm toward the end of my career, so I just gave that up. But I was very much aware of the employment issues of it.
But so you were diagnosed in 2021, but you said your employer noticed things beforehand?
Yes. Part of my diagnosis story is that my employer called me in and said, what's going on with you?
Really?
The difficulty I had is the thing Brian had talked about before, which is the masked face,
Mm-hmm.
which means I didn't think that I cared about my job or that I was paying any attention.
Like
But
you are right now.
Like me always.
the main issue that I had was memory. I simply don't transfer things from short-term to long-term memory effectively at all. And I had a tremor which was affecting my ability to type.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to my primary care physician. He referred me to a movement disorder specialist. I live 15 minutes away from a center of excellence. So I'm very happy with the care that I've received.
That's awesome.
So there were no surprises in the diagnosis process for me. I did my research. I knew going in that this is what I was going to come out with, and I would have been shocked if it had been anything else.
So Brian and I are both similar to your story in terms of I got the confirmation of the that brain scan when I was at work, and I literally went in my boss's office and I was like, I'm going home, but they knew about the whole journey that I was taking anyways, and I was like, it's finalized, it's confirmed, even though we already knew it beforehand. So they knew right away. Brian, I know, was similar, but what would you tell people who are new, either newly diagnosed or maybe they're not even diagnosed yet? What is best practice?
Okay, here's the simple thing is it's up to everyone to do what they want to do. The law is clear. It's your disease. It's your condition. It's up to you to decide what to tell anyone. But if you've been diagnosed with Parkinson's, you have obvious symptoms of Parkinson's. That's how they do the diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have a tremor or rigidity or balance problems, you're not going to get a diagnosis. So the people that work with you are going to see it. If you choose to keep it private, they're going to fire you because you're not able to do the job you used to do. That's the risk that you run by trying to keep it private. My recommendation always to employees on every area that I've done with this is that you need to be upfront with your employer about what's going on, because everyone is going to come up with an answer for why you're not doing your job the way you used to do it. If you can't do what they're paying you to do and what they've expected you to do, they're going to start trying to think of reasons. And since the law won't let them ask you if you have Parkinson's, they're going to think that you're drunk or that you're on drugs or that you're not interested in your job anymore. So the price of privacy is unemployment, and jobs are usually more important than keeping things quiet. And almost everyone tells their friends at work. If you tell your friends, they're going to tell other people, and the boss is going to find out anyway. So my recommendation always is to be absolutely upfront and tell them what's going on.
So what is the balance of telling your employer versus maybe getting FMLA protection? Are those hand in hand? Are they not?
What do you mean FMLA protection?
Like,
Sure.
So, go ahead.
I can go ahead and answer that. What he's referring to is the Family and Medical Leave Act. The Family and Medical Leave Act gives you nothing but time off. It also only gives you time off without pay, which is not a real useful thing with Parkinson's because it's not going to get better. Family and medical leave is good if you've got a broken leg or if you're out for pregnancy leave or something of that sort, something that's going to be over with. You're not going to be better in 9 or 12 weeks with Parkinson's. So that's not really going to help you. You're just getting some time off. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires the employer to accommodate the difficulties that you're having with your job. So the best thing to do is to sit down before you go to your employer and identify what the difficulties are that you're having with your job. Since Parkinson's is so different, each person has a different experience, each person has a different set of symptoms. One person may have a terrible tremor that keeps them from typing. Another person may have terrible anxiety that keeps them from showing up in public to make speeches. Everyone's got a different condition. Some people can handle a lot of stress. I had a lot of problem with executive function. I simply had trouble scheduling and remembering and setting up multiple tasks. I would go to a meeting and I'd walk out of the meeting and have no idea what was said in the meeting.
And of course, you can't read your notes either because your handwriting is so bad.
That's right. And one of the issues they said is no one can read your notes because we had to write everything down so other lawyers could read it if the case came before them, and no one could read my notes. So it was a real problem. Because these are specific things that affect you, you should walk in with a list. I have this condition, and these are the troubles that I'm having that I need to have accommodated. Now, the employer gets to pick what to do because it's the employer's business. They get to choose how they want the business to run. You tell them what the difficulty is, and their obligation under the law is to help you fix it.
So when you say it's up to them because it's their company, but does that mean that they don't have to accommodate you or employ you?
They have to do what the law calls a reasonable accommodation.
Okay.
So if your problem, for example, is your tremor and you can't type well, and typing is a fundamental part of your job, they have to accommodate that in some manner. You may say, well, what I want is this $20,000 voice recognition software program. And they may say, no, what we're going to get you is this $150 voice recognition program. And they get to make that decision.
Okay.
Because it's a reasonable accommodation from their point of view, but it has to make you able to do the job. So you can't just go in and say, I don't ever want to come to work anymore. I want to work from home forever. Because that's not really a reasonable accommodation in most jobs. But you can ask for little things. And when they make you an offer, say, I'll try it. Whatever they offer. Don't say, well, that's not going to work, because then you're not cooperating. It's supposed to be a cooperative process.
Is this a conversation with your manager and HR?
In most companies, it'll be with HR. Now, how you deal with your manager is a question of your sort of politics of your world.
Okay.
If you're in a world where your boss is a real problem and you think you have to go to HR directly, then you go to HR directly. and you might be in a company that says go to HR directly. But normally, I would recommend talking to your supervisor and then going to HR. But again, I normally had good supervisors. I did have one really bad supervisor that got me to retire from the federal government. But other than that, I really haven't had that problem. But
Do you want to call them out by name?
no. HR is the place that you want to go. HR are the people that understand the rules. Your boss, in a lot of cases, is going to say, well, I don't want to have to put up with that. But HR, and Brian can tell you this, HR has to deal with this. They are trained to deal with this. They know how to find the resources.
I'm trained.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're trained. But I know that what?
I used to train HR departments. So.
Well, maybe you can teach him some things. I know that obviously makes sense for, mid-sized to large companies. I work for a small organization where we've grown now, so we have an HR department, we have a marketing department, and that's where I ran things. But before that, when they were really small, and I know a lot of other organizations are like this, that they might not even have like an actual HR department. If somebody's in that type of situation, like and if they talk to their employer and they're like, I don't know, like the laws or legalities, like what do people do then?
Well, the federal law applies to anyone with 15 or more employees, and it counts employee very broadly. So if there's an owner who works there, but he's not an employee, it still counts that employee. It counts a lot of people who would otherwise be independent contractors. It's a very broad term.
Okay.
In many states or cities, there are laws that have fewer numbers. So, for example, in Washington State, where I practiced for a number of years, if you have 8 employees or more, the law covers you. The Supreme Court of Washington a number of years ago said, forget the 8, just anybody gets covered, because that's just what the court wanted to do. So different places have different standards. I think California has like a 3 or a 4 person standard. It varies from place to place. So you may be covered by the law. Most people, I think, will be. If you're not, then you're really just sort of stuck with they're either going to help you or they're not going to help you. But if they don't know the answers, it's easy to find the answers. There's an organization called the Job Accommodation Network. The Job Accommodation Network is a nonprofit organization which does accommodation procedures. They have lots of information for employers on how to find different ways to accommodate different situations. So if memory is an issue, they can come up with things to deal with memory. If tremor is an issue, they can come up with things to deal with tremor. But all of these things can be accommodated. What you won't find is anything that says if you have Parkinson's, the employer has to do the following things, because it's so different from person to person.
So what about, and I don't know if have you had the same job, Brian, since you've been diagnosed?
No, I've had 4.
Like different companies?
4 different companies, correct.
Did you tell them each one?
Yes.
Okay. What is your recommendation on that, Jim? Like if people we're already diagnosed with Parkinson's and we just happen to want a better opportunity, a different job, do you disclose that?
You do not need to disclose it.
You what?
You do not need to disclose it.
No, I did not disclose in the interviews, but once I got hired on,
Yeah.
I was very upfront because, as Jim had said, the mask face, I don't want to be sitting in meetings like, this guy's not even paying attention. He's been here a week. And
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's mad at me, or I've said something to offend him.
Yeah.
You do not have to tell anyone anytime that you have any problems. When they are hiring you, you don't have to tell them. Because you don't know. When they're hiring you, you don't know what the impact of your conditions are going to be. Once you show up, well, then you know what the functions of your job are, and you know how those functions are impacted by your condition. That's what the law cares about. So you may be hired for a job that was not the job you expected, and so there are different functions that you can do fine, and you don't need to tell them. You need to tell them when your abilities create a problem for the job that they've given you to do.
So, Brian, I'm curious. I know you do recruiting in HR, right?
Yes.
So do you handle, or have you ever heard anybody handling like the disabilities aspect, or no?
Not too much. I mean, we used to ask, and I don't even do it anymore, but back in the day, we'd ask if they could meet the job requirements to whatever
Yep.
they were, is like whatever was listed there in the requirements. Like, do you have any special, needs
Okay.
to
Yeah,
meet
yeah.
these requirements? Or whatever?
The only question that you're allowed to ask in the interview stage is, are you able to meet the essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodation?
Yes, that's what I
That's
used
the
to
question
ask.
that everyone says. It's on every application form.
Yeah.
And if the answer is I can do it with reasonable accommodation, you don't have to say yes with accommodation. You say yes, because the answer is yes, you can do it with reasonable accommodation. It all comes down to the reasonable accommodation question.
Interesting. So what would you, like anybody who is, again, still working and just diagnosed, what is like the main thing you would leave them with to let them know you should really think about this or consider this? What would that be?
They need to think about their job, write down what they have difficulty with, and when they believe it's becoming an issue, when they believe other people can see it, they need to go see their employer. They need to understand that more people are going to see them than they think are going to see them. People are going to recognize the symptoms sometimes before you even recognize the symptoms. And they do not need to go to their doctor and get a sheet from their doctor. They don't need to get a report about what their condition is, because the doctor doesn't know what to say, because the doctor doesn't know what the essential functions of the job are.
Right.
You just go to the employer. Here's my situation. By the way, you don't have to tell them you have Parkinson's. You can just tell them you have a condition that makes it difficult for you to do the following tasks, and you need to be accommodated. They should give you a form that you give to your doctor, and do not refuse to do that. We had so many cases in the government where somebody would file a claim and they say, they told me to go to my doctor and get information, and I told them I wasn't going to do that, so they fired me. And our answer is, yeah, right, you're fired, okay? Because they have the right to ask.
Okay.
Now, the doctor doesn't even have to tell them you have Parkinson's either. But again, as a realistic matter, people fill in the gaps of their knowledge. If they don't know what you have, they're going to think things that you have. And almost everything they're going to think is worse for you than Parkinson's.
That's actually
because
good.
drugs are worse than Parkinson's.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's
being drunk on the job is worse than Parkinson.
Much worse than Parkinson's.
Yeah. It's a good point. I mean, it's the same thing that they say with kids. It's like you do at some point want to be upfront with them and explain things, because they're going to make stuff up in their own head and not tell you about it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So adults are just like children.
And employers want to control their workplace,
Yeah.
and they don't like things they don't understand.
Absolutely.
And I would say this also, they will fire you if you don't tell them, because the employer is not allowed to ask. And the basic rule we always told employers was the first chance to fire is the best chance to fire.
You mean they would fight if they're not doing their job well? They can fire you because of that, because they don't know that there's a disease that there would be discrimination against, right?
That's right. And they can't ask.
What if, did you guys ever have situations where somebody was fired for not doing their job well, and they came back and said, well, it's because I have Parkinson's and blah, blah, blah?
I never had that with Parkinson's. I have had it with multiple other conditions.
Okay.
Normally, we can get, when we were with the government, we could normally get them back in. But when I represented private employers, they would simply refuse.
Yeah.
You should have told me that when you worked here.
Yeah.
Once you're terminated, you're terminated. You're not an employee anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because it makes sense. Like, I mean, I changed my job actually myself. So like, I was fine. I was actually promoted after my diagnosis. And I was still doing well, but then I hit that spot where medication wasn't working. The depression wasn't good. So I took a couple of months off, and then I came back and I told my boss, I'm like, I know I can't do this well for the company, because the executive function for me, it was just, it just, even though everyone's like, no, but it's fine. I'm like, no, it's really not. Like this, I should be much sharper I used to be much better at this. So let me take a step back and, do this type of job. And thankfully they were very supportive and let me, but I think it's just to your point, like, just be aware and be an advocate for yourself, just like you are at the doctor's office, but, do it with your employer as well, because you're protected.
That's right. And almost anything is possible. They can take some of your duties and give them to another employee. They can put you into a different job. They can assign you different duties. They can change your work schedule. I had a case involving a person who had an attention deficit disorder who worked at night in a bank. She got a private office because I told the bank was my client. I said, there's no one sitting in that office when this person's there. They need to be in a private office. Give her a private office. You can do anything for reasonable accommodation. It's a wide open field. So you want to be very honest and cooperative with them in getting these things done, because it can be done. I've seen some astonishing accommodation things in which people have to sit with, white noise headphones, and yet it works because they're good at their jobs. They just need to be accommodated.
That's awesome. Did you have any other questions? Sorry.
No, it's a lot of good information.
I know this is really good information. And Jim, thank you for reaching out. So, and I know I've said this to Brian's mentioned it too on other podcasts, and we make notes of it and in our comments of, Jim was just watching and he said, hey, this would be a great topic. And it is. But a lot of times, we don't know all the experts out there. So I really appreciate you reaching out to us and letting us know about this topic. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your podcast. It's been excellent. I've enjoyed watching it.
Great. Thank you. Well, I have to leave us with a 30-second. Brian loves my last 30 seconds. But honestly, in our last 30 seconds, I think what Jim was saying is spot on, is never forget that your PD is your PD. But, be smart about it. Talk to your employers. Especially if you're in a situation where it's showing, and make sure that they know what's going on with you before they make their own assessment. Obviously, at the end of the day, you do you, but I think that this is something that will resonate with a lot of people, especially in the young onset group. So with that, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.